Christmas is upon us, whether you're ready for it or not, and I could not be happier. I love preaching the story of Christmas. It is one of my favorite things to do. I've joked about it in times past. I could preach on it every year, but you would get tired of it for sure. But I absolutely love preaching about Christmas. And this year, our message series is entitled The Hope of Christmas. The series has 5 parts. And each of those parts will help unpack the Christmas story from the perspective of hope. And more than ever, this year, I just felt impressed that our world needs hope. And truthfully, the people of God and the people of West County need hope. Hope is something really, really important. It's what we need. It's what our world needs, because it seems like there's turmoil everywhere. The economy is uncertain, crazy political battles over things that we never thought were ever possible. And when people are faced with chaos, when people are faced with difficulties, when things look dark, we need hope. And Christmas is not only the time of hope, it is the provider of hope. It's the source of hope. Christmas provides us the reason to have hope. So I would encourage all of you to be here every Sunday this Christmas season, because I don't want you to miss anything. At least attend online if you're not able to be here in each of the services, because not only will we have the Christmas music, but we'll be unwrapping this topic of hope throughout this season. And so we're going to look at the hope of Christmas through a variety of means. Today we're using the preparation for hope. But in the weeks to come, we're going to look at the promise of hope, the place of hope, the person of hope, and finally on Christmas Eve, the people of hope. Each one of these elements that brought hope into the world are important for us to celebrate. And I want us to look at that. So today, let's lay the foundation, the preparation for hope. Here at the outset, I want to establish why hope is important. The definition for hope, it's defined as a feeling of expectation and desire for a certain thing to happen. It's further defined to want something to happen or to be the case. Hope is the anticipation of what we are looking forward to, the future that makes our present conditions worth enduring. That's hope. It's having something better to look forward to. I think back to being in school, in elementary school. It seemed like we were always looking forward to the next opportunity to have a day off school, right? And it was always, when's our next day off? When's our next day off? And we would pace ourselves throughout the semester, right? Until we'd get past Thanksgiving, and we're like, hey, only X number of days before we get off for the Christmas break, and we're off a whole week and a half or 2 weeks. I've known of some school districts that are off 3 weeks for Christmas, and I'm like, are you kidding me? Parents ought to revolt. And teachers, that's right. But hope is the anticipation of something that we are looking forward to, something better to come. And we need that today. Because too often we can look at our own circumstances and say, well, I don't like what's going on now. And if we lack hope, then we think that this is as good as it will ever be. But hope allows us to look to the horizon. Hope allows us to look beyond our present circumstances and see something that is better. We need hope today. And the people of the New Testament at the dawn of the first century needed hope as well. And that's what I want us to look at. I want to make a couple of observations before we jump into the passage of Scripture that we're going to read. So I'm going to ask you to turn to Luke chapter 1. Luke chapter 1. But I want to make a couple of observations before we get there. The first observation that I want us to look at as the New Testament era is starting to unfold is that the world was desperate for hope. primarily for two reasons. The most significant reason was the problem of sin. Whether they realized it or not, there was a separation between mankind and God from the time of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. It was their sin. Genesis chapter 3, verse 6 tells the story. We won't go there now, but it tells us the story of how Adam and Eve sinned. And this is where sin is introduced. It's often called the original sin. Because this sin, Adam and Eve's sin, was then passed down from generation to generation. It became part of our DNA as sinners, because we are all born as sinners. The sin nature was passed down from one generation to the next. And there needed to be an atonement, a redemption, which is essentially a sacrifice to pay the penalty for sin. And that penalty was death. If the penalty was not satisfied through another means, then the person who had committed the sin, the person that was the sinner, would then be obligated to pay that debt themselves, which meant that they would die eternally. And here we are at this dawn of a new century, a new millennia, and this sin nature had been passed down. There was this problem of sin that needed to be taken care of. The other reason, maybe not as obvious, but there started to be a feeling amongst the people of God that they were somehow forgotten by God. The reason that they began to feel that way, things were not good for Israel. They had gone into exile back in the 600s or so between the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. Both kingdoms fell within a short period of time from each other, and they were led into captivity. And over the years, they were allowed to return. They were allowed to go back to their homeland, and the temple was rebuilt. The wall around the city of Jerusalem was rebuilt, but it wasn't the same. And from the time of the end of the book of Malachi, or the Italian prophet Malachi, from that time to the beginning of the New Testament was 400 years. And during that 400 years, they often refer to it as the 400 years of silence. And they referred to it because of that way, because there were not any major prophets or minor prophets even raised up during that time. There were no known writings that were to have taken place. It was silent. And people began to feel like they had been forgotten by God. It seemed like nothing was going on, and people needed hope. The second observation that I would make is that hope required a plan. And good plans, or the best plans, take time. You see, God couldn't just throw this thing together. It was a plan that needed to be executed in a very refined way, at a very, very minute level. Imagine something being so important that God took multiple centuries, even thousands of years to plan. Because God left nothing to chance. He left nothing out of his planning. The planning for the very first Christmas was significant because what was at stake was significant. I believe the reason that God took his time was because the solution for man's sin problem could not be a temporary one. They had temporary. Year after year, the high priest would make sacrifices, and it would cover or atone for the sins that had been committed. But on the way home, if you committed sin, you had to wait another year before that sin could be atoned for by another sacrifice. And it went on and on like that for centuries. God wanted a permanent solution. Because there needed to be a deeper transformation in the heart of mankind, deeper than just looking for deliverance from a political oppression. And if you pay very much attention to the early days of the New Testament, that's why people were clamoring for the Messiah. It was because they were upset because they were under the control of the Roman government. They were oppressed, and they had been oppressed for hundreds of years. And they wanted a political situation or solution to their problems. But here's what God knew, and they didn't. It would only be a temporary solution. They had seen this play out in the times of the kings. If you read through 1st and 2nd Kings, if you read through 1st and 2nd Chronicles, you'll hear the stories of king after king who would serve God and then reject God. Then the next generation would come along and there would be a turnaround. And then the next generation would come around and it would turn the other way. And it seemed like they were always being conquered by someone. It was only going to be a temporary solution. God wanted something permanent. God wanted something more important, more transformational. It needed to be more than just mankind offering a sacrifice once a year or offering a simple apology. My bad, God. No. God took his time, and the waiting was hard. 400 years just between the Old and New Testament, but they had been waiting for centuries. So let me ask you a question. Did you, and you don't have to raise your hands, but did you ever get in trouble as a kid and your parents told you to go into your room and they would be there to administer the discipline in a minute? Yeah, I think a lot of us did. The waiting was brutal. We wanted to get it over with, didn't we? And you're just anticipating what's about to happen. What discipline are they going to mete out? And you're just kind of pacing and wondering, what is it going to be? And you wait, and you wait, and you wait. You see, the waiting has a purpose. You say, well, how could that have a purpose? They're just wanting to make me feel bad, right? Well, think about this for a moment. If the penalty is delivered too swiftly, then there isn't a realization of why it was wrong. Or to even have time to ask yourself, how do I never do this again? That waiting period is important to understand the gravity of the situation. You see, God was not wanting to have a temporary solution. So he took his time because he was wanting mankind to understand it wasn't political. It wasn't going to be temporary. Something different, something new. Messiah was not about being a temporary solution. But they didn't learn that lesson in the waiting, did they? They doubled down on the fact that they wanted it to happen right away. We want it now. But I want you to write this down. I feel like this is profound, especially since I wrote it. I've told you before, I'm humble. But sometimes I have to point it out because it's missed. It's hard to appreciate being saved from something that you never really felt the pain of. Let me share that again. It's hard to appreciate being saved from something that you never really felt the pain of. God had a plan, and he took his time to bring about the plan. God's plan took time for all the reasons that I just told you. God used that time to the fullest. And it may have appeared that there was nothing going on during the 400 years between the Old Testament and the New Testament, but that's not true. There was actually a lot of things that were taking place between Malachi chapter 4 and the 400 years until Jesus' birth. It may have been quiet, but it was anything but silent. there was a lot going on. It was the preparation for hope. What happened during those 400 years? Well, here's just a few of the things. At the close of Malachi chapter 4, Israel was under Persian control from 440 BC to 330 BC. In or around 330 BC, this is before Christ, Alexander the Great conquered the Persians, which essentially gave control to the Hellenists or the Greeks, which accounts for the Greek influence in Jewish culture by the time that Christ arrives. During this time, the Old Testament writings were translated into Greek. They called that the Septuagint. And that happened 250 years before Christ. The Greeks also introduced them to their philosophers and their pantheon of gods and mythological beliefs. And then, around 166 BC, that's when the Hasmonean dynasty ruled over the region as a result of some revolts by the Maccabees. Much of this time was led by Judas the Maccabee, who had the support of the Jews, who had been very, very oppressed by this point. And it looked a lot like freedom because they began to lose sight of their need for the Messiah to come. They operated with freedom under that rule of the Hasmoneans. And they began to question, well, maybe we don't need a Messiah because we're free. They were essentially an independent state at that time. The danger of that, of thinking that you don't need a Messiah, is something that is familiar today, isn't it? When things go well in your lives, we're very tempted to think, well, I don't need God. I don't need a Messiah. Things are great. Sin is fun. I enjoy it. It's not until the penalty or the consequences of those sins begin to come up in your life, those roots begin to grow and produce a crop that is anything but great. Well, that's what was going on during this time. This season lasted for about 100 years. And it was during this time that the Pharisees and the Sadducees rose to prominence. They established the Sanhedrin, the Jewish court. The Jewish people began to meet and worship in synagogues during this time. And they once again started to look for what the future might look like for them. And then, in about 63 BC, the Roman Empire came in and seized control of all of it. And while the Romans were in control, they gave local authority to governors. Many of them were Jewish leaders or relatives who would be loyal to Rome. They would protect Rome's interests in the region. They would be sympathetic to what was going on, and they would keep the people pacified so that they wouldn't revolt against them or cause problems. This is when Herod the Great was in leadership at the time that Jesus was born. We're going to talk about him in a couple of weeks, but it's a really fascinating story. See, again, it looked very different than what they had thought it would. But the 400 years between Malachi and the New Testament were anything but silent. Things were being prepared. God was establishing the plan. He was putting everything in place all along. And the message today is focused on this preparation of hope. There are obviously things that had to happen in order to be prepared. This solution couldn't be just thrown together, as I said before. So in this environment, we come to Luke chapter 1, where an angel of the Lord pays a visit to one of the priests, Zacharias. Let's look at it. Luke chapter 1, verse 5 says, "In the time of Herod the king of Judea, there was a priest named Zachariah who belonged to the priestly division of Abijah. His wife Elizabeth was also a descendant of Aaron. Both of them were righteous in the sight of God, observing all the Lord's commands and decrees blamelessly. But they were childless because Elizabeth was not able to conceive, and they were both very old. Once, when Zechariah's division was on duty and he was serving as priest before God, he was chosen by lot, according to the custom of the priesthood, to go into the temple of the Lord and burn incense. And when the time for the burning of incense came, all of the assembled worshipers were praying outside. Then an angel of the Lord appeared to him standing at the right hand of the altar of incense. When Zechariah saw him, he was startled and was gripped with fear. Can I just interject here that when you were in that place, the Holy of Holies, and someone else shows up that you're not expecting, I think freak out is probably a mild way to describe that. He was startled. He was afraid. But that's what's happened. Well, then, as this unfolds, the angel of the Lord appeared to him, standing at the right side, his grip, says, "Do not be afraid." Why do angels always start with that phrase? Do not be afraid. It's because they were scared. And you and I would be too, right? We can't pretend that it wouldn't affect us. But he says, do not be afraid. Understatement. Your prayer has been heard. Your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you are to call him John. He will be a joy and a delight to you, and many will rejoice because of his birth. For he will be great in the sight of the Lord. He is never to take wine or fermented drink, and he will be filled with the Holy Spirit even before he is born. He will bring back many of the people of Israel to the Lord their God, and he will go on before the Lord in the spirit and power of Elijah to turn the hearts of the parents to their children and to the disobedient to the wisdom of righteous, and make ready a people prepared for the Lord. Zechariah asked the angel, "How can I be sure of this? I am an old man, and better than Abraham," he phrases this better, "and my wife is well along in years." The angel said to him, "I am Gabriel. I stand in the presence of God, and I have been sent to speak to you and tell you this good news. And now you will be silent and not able to speak until the day this happens, because you did not believe my words, which will come true at their appointed time." Meanwhile, the people were waiting for Zechariah and wondering why he stayed so long in the temple. When he came out, he could not speak to them. They realized he had seen a vision in the temple, for he kept making signs to them but remained unable to speak. When his time of service was completed, he returned home. After this, his wife Elizabeth became pregnant and for 5 months remained in seclusion. "The Lord has done this for me," she said. "In these days he has shown his favor and taken away my disgrace among the people." Why is that story such a big deal for the Christmas story? Well, it's a big deal, again, for the reasons that I told you as to why the world needed hope. Whether they realized it or not, they were separated from God, and then there was the fact that they hadn't heard much for a few hundred years. So this moment for Zechariah was huge. They'd wanted to have a child and were not able to, and they're suddenly being told that they're going to have a child. But it's in this moment they begin to realize something is shifting, something is changing, something is about to happen that's really, really big. It's also a big deal because they were being prepared for the coming of John the Baptist. And you say, well, why is that important? The coming of John the Baptist was important because he was supposed to be the forerunner, the one who prepared the way for Messiah. This is significant. God prepared the key people by having an angel appear to them to get them ready for their role. In Matthew chapter 1 and 2 and Luke chapter 1 and 2, we see these encounters that the angels are having with Mary and with Joseph and with Simeon, preparing them for what was about to happen. And I absolutely love this story. I love the fact that it wasn't the same angel. This angel was Gabriel. The other one that went to see the shepherds in the fields, his name was Harold or something like that. I think it says, "Hark, Harold the angel sings." That may not be how it goes. What was happening? God was making preparation for hope. Hope was in preparation. Now, as much as I love Christmas, and I do, I love the trees, I love the lights, I love the glitter as long as it's on someone else. I love the music. As much as I love all that, I despise hanging Christmas lights. Now, I want to see Christmas lights on everybody's house. I want to see it on my neighbors. I want to see lights on my house. I just don't want to be the one that has to put them up. Now, this has its roots in some very serious trauma in my life. I may have shared this story with one or two people because I have this phobia about hanging Christmas lights, but one winter, I'm hanging Christmas lights on our house. I will point out the fact that I was doing it by myself. My lovely children and my wife were cozy around the fireplace watching Christmas movies. Hallmark wasn't a thing then, so I'm thinking it was Santa Claus is coming to town. I don't know what it was. But they weren't out there with me, and I'm up on this roof that was a cedar shake roof. And it had recently been moist. And if you know anything about cedar shake roofs, when they get wet, they're slick. There was also a little bit of ice that remained. And on this one portion of the roof, I felt the need to get on the roof in order to get the lights on this peak of the front of our house. So I'm there putting these lights on, and all of a sudden I slip. And I begin sliding down the roof on my rear end, feet first. You think, well, just stick the landing, right? I'd have broken both legs for sure, but I was going at a rapid rate down the roof, and I caught myself on the gutter before going over. My chest is doing this because my heart was doing this. And it took me a while to regain my composure, but then I was like, well, I'll just call for help from my family. Little help here. Oh, somebody help. Everybody in the neighborhood was gone. And my kids and my lovely wife were snuggled, probably drinking cocoa. And I'm about to die. Because then I realized that the ladder, I had actually had to climb up off the top rung of the ladder to get up because my ladder was a little short. And I had to climb down and find the ladder. Well, I made it down, as you can see. But I declared that that would be the last year I ever hung Christmas lights on my house. That is not a true statement because every year I go back out and I put up Christmas lights on the house. I just don't like it. All that to say, I love Christmas, except for that. But Christmas takes a lot of preparation, doesn't it? There's a lot that goes into preparing for Christmas. It doesn't just happen. The decorations don't just appear. All of the preparation, all of the decorations are important in some way. Maybe it's sentimental. Maybe it's something that your family has always done. It's a tradition. But either way, they're significant enough that you put the effort in and you make the preparation. Christmas is important, and it takes a lot of preparation, just like it takes a lot of preparation for hope. God had to put a number of things in place for hope to happen. So let me ask you another question. Do you ever find yourself getting angry when people put their Christmas decorations up a few months early? There are a lot of people who do. Can't believe it. You believe it? October. They've got Christmas decorations up at Walmart. What is going on with this world? Right? Everybody loses their mind because it's a couple months early. Can't we just give the season? What happened to Thanksgiving? Everybody rails about it. It was like, we can't even have Thanksgiving, and now we've already moved on to Christmas and Thanksgiving. Well, there's no good Thanksgiving music. I'm just going to tell you. Good King Wenceslas, that's it. I have to admit, there are times when I've gotten upset, but it doesn't bother me anymore, and it's because of this story. You say, why is that? I believe this story is the equivalent of hanging up the Christmas lights for Christmas early. And if you start thinking this through, John the Baptist was to be the forerunner of Jesus. And that had to be communicated to the father of John the Baptist, right? Zechariah. And if you do the math, Elizabeth gets pregnant after John comes home from his service in the temple. Then the angel meets with Mary and Joseph and gets them prepared. And based upon the fact that Mary visited Elizabeth when Elizabeth was in her 6th month of pregnancy, Mary had 9 months of pregnancy. When you add that to the 6 months that Elizabeth was already pregnant, are you following where I'm going? If we agree that December 25th is the birth of Jesus, probably not. But it's the agreed upon date, right? That's when we celebrate. It's kind of like President's Day. Kind of lumped it all together. But December 25th, if we go with 25th as the birth of Jesus, that means that this conversation between Gabriel and Zechariah took place 15 months before the first Christmas. And you want to get upset because Christmas cards are available at Walmart in October. Anything that's this important is worth preparing for. And God made sure that the preparations were in place. "15 months in advance." What does all of this mean? It means that the preparation of hope was important. And that God cared enough about this hope that you and I could have through Jesus Christ, that he made sure that everything was in place and didn't miss a thing. Would you bow your heads with me this morning? There were a lot of things that had to happen in order for the first Christmas to take place, in order for the birth of hope to happen. The observations that I made at the beginning of this message were that the world is in desperate need of hope. The second observation that I made is that hope requires a plan. And good plans, actually the best plans, take time. And maybe you're here this morning and you need hope in your life. I'm here to tell you that hope is here. And hope is here because God took the time to make preparations. In fact, we're told that the preparations for your salvation happened before the foundations of the earth. when God spoke light into existence, a relationship with you was already on his mind. We were created in the image of God for the purpose of relationship with him. And if we're in relationship with God, what could be better? I shared with you last Sunday that one of the reasons that God created mankind was to be able to walk in the cool of the day with Adam. That was the kind of relationship that he desired with mankind. But that had been severed because of sin. And even though God knew that Adam and Eve would choose the wrong thing, he gave them the ability to choose it. But he also made a way for them to be restored and redeemed. If that's not hope, I don't know what is. If you're in need of hope in your life, hope is here. God made sure that all of the preparations were made beforehand and that nothing was missed because you are that valuable to him. Jesus was born in a manger. He grew up to take our sins to the cross and die in our place. And he did that for you. That's the hope of Christmas. And he loved you enough to make the preparation. If you're here this morning and you say, Pastor Greg, I want to receive Jesus in my heart. I'd like for my sins to be forgiven. I want the preparation that God made for Jesus to come, for Messiah to come and to be born in the manger. I want those preparations to have meaning and importance in my life by making him the Lord and Savior of my life. If you're here this morning and you say, Pastor Greg, I want that today. I admit that I'm a sinner and I cannot do this on my own. I was never capable of it. I believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God and that he died so that I could be free. And I make a confession that Jesus Christ is the Lord of my life from this day forward. If that is your statement today, lift your hand up and let me pray with you. Is there one? Thank you. Anyone else? Thank you. For each of us, my prayer is that Christmas means more than just the gifts, more than just the lights, more than just the tinsel and glitter, more than just the music. My prayer for every one of you is that Christmas is the foundation of your hope. Because of what Jesus did, we have redemption. Because of what God did to bring all of that to pass so that Jesus would be born the very first Christmas, makes all of that possible. If you're here this morning and you say, Pastor Greg, I've made a decision to follow Christ. I'm a Christ follower. But I will admit today that Christmas has not been about the hope. It's been about a lot of other things. But this morning, I've been reminded that Christmas is about hope. It's all about hope. And I want you to pray for me that I will not lose grip on hope and the ability to extend hope to others by sharing Christmas with them. If that's you, if you don't want to lose grip of the hope, if you don't want to lose sight of the hope, if you want to be able to extend hope, just lift your hands toward heaven and say, God, would you help me to not forget? Would you help me to hold on to the hope that you went through so much effort to provide for me? Even when people were thinking that you had forgotten, you were still at work to bring hope. The hope of Christmas. The hope of the world in Jesus, our Messiah. Emmanuel. God with us. Father, you've seen the hands that have been raised, and you have heard our prayers. You will forgive the sins of those who have admitted that they're sinners and far from you. You will honor their belief that you are truly the Son of God, and their confession makes it secure that you are their Messiah. We rejoice with them, and we rejoice with every heart who will grab on and never let go of the hope of Christmas. Be with us over these next several weeks as we prepare our hearts for what's next, as we celebrate you. Thank you for the reminder that our only hope of redemption is in the blood of Jesus, and that the promise of restoration is fulfilled in Jesus. I pray that as we celebrate this year, as we wish one another Merry Christmas, that we are reminded of the hope. In just a moment, we're going to have a baptism, actually 2 baptisms. So we're just going to continue to worship.